Later, I decided to get up, get in the shower, and clean myself up. I stood in the water and wondered again why I deserved this. Why wasn't prayer working for me anymore? Why was God not listening? Was it my fault? Was I the reason John was this way? It couldn't just be the drugs and alcohol. It just couldn't. So much had happened, but I had tried my best to keep my faith. I knew I could help him. I knew that he loved me. I had long ago decided that he just didn't know how to love me. He was never taught about God and love. It wasn't his fault. He didn't know any better. But this time, he had gone too far. He was gone and I was done. I knew God wanted me to stay, but how could a God that loves me want me to stay in this environment? A piece of me disappeared that day, and in that moment, something inside of me died. I had struggled my entire life, and now I just couldn't struggle anymore. I wondered what was next for me and my baby. As I stood in the kitchen, looking out into the world through the window, I saw John coming up the driveway, and I was prepared to do what I needed to do to keep me and my baby safe. But after looking in the mirror and seeing my black eye and swollen face, and I glanced at my growing belly, I was in a total fog. My brain didn't seem to comprehend what was happening. I couldn't feel scared. I couldn't feel sad. I couldn't feel anything. I had been in so much pain throughout my life, but I had never felt so emotionless. I stood there with my back turned to him, and the closer he got, the more I began to shake. He wrapped his arms around me and told me he was sorry. He began to explain that I had a way of making him rage, and if I would just try to change, then this would never happen again. He slowly turned me around and gently touched my injured face and kissed me softly. I didn't return the affection, and he could see it. He asked me to forgive him and promised to never upset him again. I had no emotion, no feeling, so I said nothing. He said we should go to Dale's and pretend nothing happened, and all I could do was nod my head to say yes. He asked me to cover my injuries with makeup and said we should act as if nothing happened. So I did what I was told. I didn't know what else to do. I went through the motions because I felt like God had abandoned me. I was alone and so scared. He talked on the drive and I just listened. He said not one word about the abuse. He really did act as if nothing had happened. I followed him into Dale's house, and it was full of people. Everyone was happy, and they were drinking, dancing, and laughing, happy to see us. I was still emotionless. I wondered if I should just walk out the door and go to the hospital. I wondered if I should call my parents, but I knew if my dad heard what had happened to me, his response, vengeance, would be swift and violent, and he would go to jail. I wondered if I would die that night. My mind raced, and I just needed someone to tell me everything was going to be okay. Everyone was enjoying the party so much that no one noticed the black eye or the swollenness of my face, or at least they chose not to notice. I sat on the couch beside Dale. Dale had been one of John's best friends for a long time, but there was something different about him tonight. He was quiet and had never spoken much to me, but on this night he turned with a smile and started talking to me. I wondered if he'd pretend not to notice like everyone else, so I slowly turned my head and made eye contact with him. His smile quickly faded, and I could tell that he wasn't trying to hide the fact that he saw my injuries. He looked at me, sadness on his face. He leaned over closer to me and asked if I was okay. The way he looked at me showed me that he really did care and helped me to feel even just a little bit less alone. I decided I was going to ask him for help. But as I opened my mouth, I heard John come up from behind us to make sure I didn't say a word. He sat between me and Dale and started talking to his friend, but made sure to leave me out of the discussion. After a few moments, he said we had to leave and forced me out the door. As the door closed behind us, he grabbed me tightly by the arm and dragged me to the car. He forced me inside and slammed the door behind me. He was rough and hateful, and it was very clear that he couldn't care less about our baby. His driving was reckless, and he almost crashed several times. He screamed at me for the way I acted with Dale. He said it's no one's business what goes on in our marriage. Finally, I'd had enough. I told him that a real man doesn't hit his wife or talk to her the way he does. And a real man would never hit a woman who's carrying his child. I felt good about standing up for myself. I couldn't hold back anymore. I couldn't just sit there quietly. But he didn't let up. And he was driving way too fast. It seemed as though he never touched the brakes, and every mile or two, he would slap me and push my head up against the window over and over again, while I begged and pleaded for him to stop. I pleaded for our baby, and I begged him to care. He kept telling me that he didn't care, and he wished I didn't exist. As we passed a long stretch of woods, I began to pray to myself, God, please help me. Please keep my baby safe. Please, let me make it home alive. I couldn't stop sobbing. I decided I needed to beg him to forgive me, just to make sure I lived through this night.